Initially, I started with fencing because I was at a point in my life where I wanted to do something that I could have ownership over.
Did you have quite a competitive nature between you and your brother?
I never really started fencing with the sense of competition to show my brother that I could be better or do something higher than he did in the sport. It was more of an inspiration, what they're doing and tracking my own reactions rather than getting caught up in like useless semantics such as training with an Olympic champion from South Korea. His name's Park Sang-young. Why are all these people tracking and watching me?
Hello, everyone. I'm Coach Ognian, and you're watching Athlete Support. Today's special guest is Jesse Ndjeka. Jesse is a Cleveland State University fencer, and he's one of the top fencers in Cleveland State in USA. Hi, Jesse. How are you?
Hi, Coach Og. I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for joining us, and I'm really looking forward to this chat.
And thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent. Jesse, how did you start with fencing and why?
So initially, I started with fencing because I was at a point in my life where I wanted to do something that I could have ownership over. And I had an older brother who was initially in the sport before me around the late 2000s and early 2010s. And when he eventually stopped fencing around 2012, 2013, I just sort of rummaged through his old kit and got started in the sport around late 2016, 2017.
Did you have quite a competitive nature between you and your brother? Was it like, I want to show you, like, I'm going to be better at this? Or what was that initial thought? Or was there something in the background other than being competitive with your brother?
Well, I would say I am a very competitive person. I never really started fencing with the sense of competition to show my brother that I could be better or do something higher than he did in the sport. It was more of an inspiration because while I was super competitive with my older brother, he was someone that inspired me and someone that I looked towards when I was looking for any sort of guidance in life. So in a sense, it was kind of a passing of the torch rather than me kind of taking the reins and showing how it's done.
Before you started fencing, did you do any other sports? And what was the feeling towards those sports if you have done those sports?
Before I did fencing, I was really active in soccer and also did a bit of track and cross country. And I guess you could say like in my younger ages, like second grade below, I played a lot of tennis. And while I did like those sports, it wasn't really any sort of sport I felt like spoke to me. Like I didn't have any sort of like emotional or like intrinsic attraction to those sports. And when I started off fencing, it was a whole different rush and a whole different feeling. So you could say I had more of like a pull towards fencing rather than a sport that I just picked and stuck with.
What is that pull? What is that feeling? Can you put it in words? What is that passion that was ignited so early on, and you knew at that point that that's the sport that set it in a different view and path and feeling than the sports that you mentioned, tennis and soccer and track sports? What was so different about fencing?
I would say that there was a different level of excitement that came with fencing. I mean, at the time, fencing wasn't a sport I was like too familiar with, and it wasn't a sport that any of my friends were really like into or invested in. And kind of getting started up in the sport and like having that passion ignited was in a sense like a rush of like a new feeling, some like a different sport, something that I really wasn't exposed to too much because while my brother did compete, it was during the years of where I was still very young. I didn't quite understand it, but it was also the only sport I would ever see when I'd go visit my brother when he lived in Pretoria and I still stayed in Limpopo. And I would only ever see the sport maybe 3, 4 times a year whenever I had a chance to go see any of these competitions. So it's something that was like very rare to me. And just having the chance and the opportunity to participate and actually have like enjoy it, I guess you could say the excitement of doing something, I guess, apart from my friend group was something that was like, it was a very cool feeling, I could say, for lack of a better term.
From what I understood, you started competing very early on, and that was something that uh, created almost a trigger that solidified that feeling that this is the sport? Can you tell us more about that?
Oh yeah. So in my fencing career, I guess my tournament came before the practice. And like I said earlier, I'm a very competitive person. And just having that sense of competition and having the opportunity to like fence and prove myself was something I guess you could say got me hooked on the sport. And that's when I knew very early on that I liked fencing more so for the competition than for the leisurely activity. So that's what kind of got me. That's kind of what got the ball rolling and kept it rolling. So
And your coach's words at that time was, uh, you need something to be pulled in, immersed. It's almost like it was like, okay, I'm not seeing as much excitement while you participating and fencing in a class. But if we try and do a competition, that might trigger something, uh, a deeper feeling. Was that true? Can you tell us more about that?
I could say that is true. The very unique thing about my case was I didn't have a like true coach by the time I started because I enrolled in the Tischler Fencing Academy. I guess you could say later on, I think like 6 months after I started fencing. But there's a lot of truth in that where I was sort of handed the tools in fencing and getting that competition to sort of give me an environment to use those tools and the skills that I guess you could say were otherwise very bland to me in a club setting where we just weren't fencing for anything. It gave me a real sense of purpose. So I'd say that statement is very true. It applied perfectly to my situation. And I guess you could say going forward, anyone that has started up the sport of fencing and picked it up, they should definitely not knock it off until they have their first competition where they feel they can really compete.
And what happened in that first competition? Were you a winner right at the beginning and getting a gold, or was it just a feeling of enjoying the competition regardless of the medals and places took? What was that uh, passion? Was it just winning and being the best, or just exhilaration and feeling of enjoyment within competition?
I'd say it's very strongly tied to the exhilaration of the competition because my first tournament, it wasn't necessarily a gold. My first time I got a bronze medal, but just having that outlet to compete, to go all out, and having real consequences where if I lost, I would be out of the tournament. I mean, I only knew I was in the semifinals when I was halfway done with it. So it was a very I guess inspiring moment for me where I kind of just like got lost in the motions when typically I think like if you spoke to my parents or like my older brother, they will tell you I'm someone who's like very measured, very calculated. I'll know like how far I want to commit to something and I'll count it down to the seconds. And for me, that was like a first real moment where I was invested in something, but I was not necessarily keeping track of like the time or how far I had progressed, how many bouts I had left. It was something I just completely lost myself. And when it all ended, I lost in the semifinals, unfortunately. But I still had that feeling like I want to do this again. I want to feel this more. I want next time I compete, I want to like try something different. And those for me were like unexplored emotions because everything else before is like I'm just gonna get it done and go about my day. So it was something that very much got me hooked onto the feeling, and I just kept running the scenarios through my mind over and over and over again.
Jesse, I'm going to step back a bit and I'm going to ask you a question. When it came to selecting fencing, and I know that starts with your older brother, but the question that I have with South African fencers is why fencing? It's not exactly a big sport here in South Africa. Yes, it's been around for a long time, but it's not, the competitions are 100, 150 participants on average. So we're not talking big competitions. There are not many clubs. Very few cities in South Africa have fencing. Pretoria has, Johannesburg has, Cape Town, Bloemfontein, Limpopo. But these are like, you can name them very quickly and that's it. And then if we're talking about America, it's just everywhere. So what was the first initial, I'm sure you've had these conversations with your big brother. What was his first pull towards a sport that is not that known. And what was your thinking about starting a sport in South Africa that is not that known amongst South Africans or popular?
So I would say in the conversations I had with my older brother was essentially just about the initial pull, whether you liked it or not. Because I did come from a family background that was very encouraging. I know my mom, she was kind of stressed out just a little bit. Dad he was a little skeptical, but at the end of the day, the general consensus between me, my brother, my parents was that I have something that I really enjoy. I have something I'll take seriously. And it's something I can fully immerse myself. And this wasn't necessarily an activity that was a placeholder in my life. It wasn't something that I just did for the sake of doing because they understood the value that you could gain from fencing, like the general fitness, coordination, but deeper in that with the, I guess you could say like the harder, softer skills was the discipline, the preparation, the sen like dealing with pressure, having those critical moments in your and like just like that comes with any sport really, were things that my parents, after lengthy conversation and a bit of worry, were things that they understood were good for my overall development. And I guess like to put it like simply how my father sees it is that it's something that I really like, something I was dedicated to. So why the hell not? There's all the other external factors like how big the sport is, how much money is in it, what the future just looks like in the sport was something that wasn't too important because it was something that I'd shown no prior dedication earlier to anything before. And it was something that basically stuck with me. And that was something for them that was bigger than, I guess you could say, the traction the sport had in the country.
So basically, your passion was acknowledged by your parents. That was first place. Then obviously the development, and you talk about the discipline. And I always like to say this with the fences, and the eyes go big, and they go like, "Is it?" And then of course it is. And what is it? I always say it's a core martial art, and I think it takes a moment for that to sink in and process. And then I think we all have this idea of karate, taekwondo, MMA. Those are martial arts. But if you think about the history of fencing, that's martial means military. Martial means
Mhm.
military. And the moment you talk about sword or rapier, that's basically what that is. That's a martial art in essence. And the reason I'm going this a long way around and mentioning this, it's something that I always like to say. There are many sports out there, and yes, don't discount them, don't say they're lesser than. Even though I say lesser than, I always say if you talk about the mentality of a martial artist, someone who deals with a sword or a gun or something that's an exchange of blows where you get hurt, the discipline and mindset are a little bit different. The commitment seems a little bit different. The effort seems a little bit different. And I don't want everyone now jumping on me and saying, I do soccer and you're wrong. I'm super committed. It's completely wrong. But what I'm saying is it's that uh, probably your parents looked at it and thought, wow, the development of my child is unbelievable. And also when it comes to martial artists, they make split-second decisions and they're very confident. And I think that's another thing. Uh, Anything where you confronting another opponent, you have a sword in your hand, and yes, you can't kill or injure. Well, injury is debatable. You walk away with bruises. I've seen them. Um, your wits have to be sharp because it's not so, okay, there is no consequence. So I think to myself, with your development and your parents noticing little changes, they go, oh, this is the right sport for my child because the confidence is growing and he can make split-second decisions and challenge and stand his ground. Was that acknowledged in the stages while you were doing with the different stages of your development in fencing or not?
Oh no, that undoubtedly was. Yeah. I think my mom would best describe as that she saw me become just a little bit more assertive with my decision making, where I would make a decision understand the risks, understand the consequences, thoroughly go through everything that it needed. And I was resolute with my final decisions, where it's like, we're gonna do this. I don't care how hard it gets. I have accounted for the risks and I'm willing to eat them. So, and that was something that it was, it wasn't something that was she was used to seeing from me. But after some time, when, after you get more than two good decisions stacked together, it becomes a case of, well, it's going better for him because he's actually taking charge in life. He's doing things for himself now. And I can rely on that confidence that if something does go wrong, he's going to be the first one to clean up the mess without asking for help. So
Do you feel that it helps you with the discipline, with the studying, that there are overlaps there as well, being disciplined in a sport and being good with your studies? Do you feel that academically and physically there is a link there?
yeah, I would say that. As you know, I studied psychology for my undergrad before starting my master's program. And I would say that I have seen and studied a lot of that connection between the discipline in the body, which naturally can transfer over to discipline in the mind. And also like my own anecdotal evidence is the time before I was really like invested in fencing, that gap period when I was still like choosing a sport. I guess you could say the lack of purpose or like a greater purpose outside of just academics had me had my goals in academics loftier than usual, whereas a case of I would like to get these good grades, but there wasn't really any motivation or discipline or that push to sort of get me like going, like stuck in my academics. And once I got started up in fencing, going through that development, the studies were just something I naturally kept up to speed with because again, you can't really be enjoying yourself outside the classroom while coming back to a horror show of marks inside the classroom. And I come from a very academic household anyway, so just having that greater sense of purpose outside of the books was something that really kept me up to speed with my grades. And right now, I can say that it's been the best change for me because having that purpose has me doing things more mindfully, more thoughtfully, and I guess you could say my time management skills as well have gotten a huge boost. And just being organized and handling my own business before I can, go out and have fun with my swords. So
How much, I mean, that's an interesting field of study, psychology. How much do you think fencing has to do with the selection? And I think it's so vague and broad when you said fencing. Does fencing have anything to do with your choice of profession? But to be a certain mindset and select fencing as your primary sport, and then from there to go into psychology study, that already creates certain links and personality types. Have you ever thought of that? And obviously, you're studying psychology, and you probably uh, studied yourself as a primary subject and thought, how did I come around to that? What are the effects? And do the selected sports uh, add to that, or is it something deeper within you that sets you on that path?
you are right. I have had the thought. I've lingered on it a couple of times throughout the years. And I would say that it would be something deeper. Um that's something that pulls you towards the sport rather than the sport influencing that mindset. And obviously, I do believe that both are true. You could be someone that didn't really have that inclination to join the sport, but then once you're in, it can draw out other parts of yourself that either were very dormant or something that was mainly in the background, but gave it more time to shine. But for me, as the prime suspect, and like my thoughts, and like I guess you could say like that pseudo study is that I noticed that there was something deeper within me that kind of pulled me to that sport because it was just a sense of having something that was like mine that I could like foster, develop, and like take out. So yeah,
So
I would say
there
that's
is a,
the link.
there is a definite link there, even if you can't quite put a finger on it and say quantify it and put it into like scientific terms. And I know with psychology you would like to the study of mind.
Yeah.
You would want to put it in the specific bullet points and then discuss each one of them. But it is an interesting thought and analysis of a mind that links up two things like fencing and you're
Hmm.
outwitting the opponent, and psychology where you're helping the person be better, understand where they're coming from, and
Hmm.
help them naturally set them on the right path that will work for them. So
Hmm.
I thought that is a very interesting study. Talking about study, how did you end up being in Cleveland and studying there? What was the process? Was it a fencing scholarship, or how did the process start?
So how the process started was I didn't have a scholarship outright in my first year. Um, I My parents and I got in contact with a college recruiter actually. They were a recruiting agency that were trying to get South African athletes and connect them to American universities. And they put me in contact with a select group of American universities that had fencing and had roster spots. And a lot of the talk was give it a year, we'll see how you do, and then we can talk about how scholarships go. And what set Cleveland State apart from the other suitors, I guess you could call them, who that were trying to recruit me, were that they had academic scholarships available for me. And although I did not get them in my first year, after my first year, through my performance in sports, through my performance in the classroom, I did receive, I think it was between two or three scholarships where that were given to student athletes who had good performance in the classroom, student athletes who had good performance in their sport, in their respective sports. And I picked up a job just to have a more full schedule because in the American education system, it's very different from South Africa, where as opposed to having something to do every single day, like in high school, coming to America, I had two online classes, two in-person classes, and I had a very empty schedule. And me having a job while being a student athlete qualified me for a third scholarship given to student athletes who have jobs to supplement their tuition. So it was just a matter of getting in contact with coaches. And then after speaking to coaches, they connected me with admissions, which got me in contact with all the types of scholarships that the university had to offer. It was a pretty fast and streamlined process, but I would say the emotional and the mental investment in getting it going, getting it started was something that was very taxing because when mine started, we got into contact with the college recruiters and it became a whole buildable portfolio of sorts where I had to get a lot of footage of my fencing. I had to explain my background, how long have I been in the sport, and sort of market myself to become a promising prospect for that university's collegiate program. Because essentially they're looking for an athlete they can sort of just plug into the system that will function either immediately or with very little time to develop and get up to speed with the collegiate system. So,
And then just run us through that process when you first were exposed to possibility of starting studies in America. You mentioned, I think it was iron. What was the iron track? What was it? Something iron that you they came to advertise at your school, and that was your first connecting point. And how did that initial thoughts start from there and going, okay, maybe I should go to study in America and then take it from there.
so basically, it was a recruiting agency called IM360. I believe they go by
Iron 360s.
ISAM 360 now. But they had a little sales pitch at my high school, Pretoria Boys High School. And they basically just told us, hey, it's a possibility for you to continue your sports at a higher level in a better environment with world-class training facilities. And initially, the neurons were firing in my head, just thinking that, okay, this is possible. I can go further with the sport. Because before, became a whole case of trying to figure out how to progress in the sport within a competitive group that wasn't necessarily large. It was several times smaller than a World Cup I could compare it to in like Europe. But given that opportunity and that platform to go from competing in South Africa to going to America, where the fencing core group was, I think you're looking like in the thousands, where you have hundreds of competitions a year, you have high level competitions, really good coaches. Compared to South Africa and America, it's an abundance. And just having that initial thought saying, okay, it's a possibility now. I guess you could say from that first meeting, I was like all in. I was like, we need to make this work. I'm like, wherever the money comes from, I will find a way. But I just need to get my foot in the door for that opportunity because I was also at a point in my fencing where I didn't really know how to progress. I sort of like plateaued at a point where it was confusing. I was unsure of what I needed to do to get better, who I need to fence, because at Tischler fencing school, I was already fencing against the best fencers in the country every single day, and I just needed a change of pace.
Jesse, we talked about you transitioning with academics and being the right match with the academics in America. And we talked about, are you the right match? The being able to immerse yourselves in a study in America, matching the culture and way of living. And you were clear that that was all thumbs up, green light. But what about transitioning from the skill training, fencing skill training in South Africa and going to America?
Coming from the South African context of fencing, from going to 2 to 3 practices a week to a full stack schedule that looked like 5 to 6 days of practice any given week was something that I could say was again a very like aggressive transition in terms of practice, especially after the lockdown period in South Africa. Um, I mean, I was greeted with a host of strength and conditioning coaches, a host of personal trainers, and just having all that backed by my head fencing coach, a sort of rough and wrist development process that required me to now sort of up my performance levels, having a wider window of performance and sort of narrowing that down and having more intense competitive and more sort of um I guess it's like a more physically taxing training schedule or regimen and having to keep that level of intensity going at a consistent rate rather than having a slow build up that in a South African context back when I was fencing the country regularly. So maybe like peaking once every month or so. And I'd say at the time it was something that I didn't necessarily buy into quite immediately, but after just trusting the process, giving it more than a couple months to settle into, and just alleviating that pressure off my own shoulders, I saw it was something that really greatly benefited me. And with hindsight now, it's something that I would gladly do again. And I would just wish that I guess, did more with my time.
Jesse, you mentioned about not buying into that kind of training initially. Why was that? What was it that made you feel at first like maybe resistant to it?
I guess you could say the initial resistance from the workload seeming like doubling overnight, and it was something hard to keep up with at first. Then I had a sort of I sort of had like sort of like mental reassessment and understood what I wanted harder competitions. I wanted to progress in the sport, and more than anything, I just wanted to continue as long as I could. And for me to continue having that dream or following that dream is just like bite down, put my like dig my feet into the ground and just keep pushing forward. So it didn't take too long, but there was some resistance at the beginning because it was just a whole new world. It was completely different from what I came from. And at the time it was sort of a different approach at living a life that I already had my own preconceived notions and beliefs about. So it definitely took some some work to be open-minded and reception for that way of training, that methodology. But I'm glad I accepted it.
Do you think it was pushing you out of the comfort zone and that was the reason why you were reserved? Was that what I'm getting here with
Oh
the
yeah, definitely. Definitely. They were testing what I was okay with and then throwing it out the window and giving me a whole new set of things to get used to.
And what are we talking about? Strength training, sports psychology, nutrition. What are we talking about? The additional elements to your skill training.
In a brief summarization, I could say it was the added It was the added strength and conditioning training where I'd already been familiar with everything else, but they were giving me like new players, new roles in like my life that I could directly interact with that wouldn't necessarily just have a sit down meeting with me like once every week or so to assess what I'd been going through, but also like a daily check-in where I could get the correct nutrition. I was doing the right exercises. I was doing the right training. I was as like something as little as like I was getting the right amount of hours of sleep every night. There were people that were provided to me that I could contact every single day. So I guess you could say just the accessibility of having those resources was very different, very new to me. And at first it was like, why are all these people tracking and watching me? It was a bit overwhelming because these were things I didn't necessarily keep in mind or had ready information to tell. But it was something I got very used to just outlaying what the exercises, what my work looked like, what I ate, how I slept.
So it was too much pressure, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, very draining because now you have to acclimatize to everyone asking you, check in, check in. So you're
Mhm.
feeling like where do I go? My space is being
Mhm.
affected, and I'm like almost feeling like I'm physically and mentally maybe breaking at certain point until you adjust it. And what was the transition to adjusting? Was it you first seeing the results and going, oh wow, now I see the result, and this is the psychologically what made you feel that um, this is working. I have to now just push through. Was that it?
It was a bit of mix of two different things. Yes, partly that I saw my results were getting better on the days I followed the plan, but it was also just a case of having a sit down chat with my father over the phone where he kind of just like reminded me that responsibility is a reward. And now I have people giving me the greatest responsibility of all, and that's just taking care of my body and them following up on those claims. Because it's easy to ask an athlete, are you healthy? Like you won't take a second thought, say, yeah, I'm pretty healthy. But having someone to actually sit down and look at what makes you healthy, what makes you think that you're healthy, and giving you sort of tools and assistance and advice on how to correct things that could be better, as opposed to just being at the base level of good. I'd say I had a lot of people here at Cleveland State University that were invested in my success and invested in making me reach greatness. So it was a lot of times where we hit like a sort of stopgap in a conversation where the trainers, the psychologist, coach would ask me, okay, you're feeling good. Don't you want to feel better? And I was basically met with that challenge every single day and understand that they were giving me this responsibility now to sort of um, take care of my own body, take care of my own results, and having more ownership in how I performed and having really no reason to fail. It became a whole case of I need to now take onus, handle that responsibility, and take it as far as I could because no one else is going to push the load for me.
Talking about the additional accompanying um, to skill training, your strength and conditioning. Um, when you started, uh, how did you respond to strength and conditioning? From what I understand, you were not doing strength and conditioning in South Africa for trying to better your skill training. What was the transition specifically to strength and conditioning? And was there also a program for injury prevention and understanding how you can prevent injuries and get the most out of the training sessions?
So the transition for me was it was really triggered when I had my first ever, I'd never done this before in South Africa, but I had my very first video analysis on my own fencing, something that I still cringe at today. I can't watch myself perform, but just going through like a bout that I had at a high level competition and just seeing certain pitfalls or certain attacks, certain defenses that I had either like executed perfectly or just poorly, and just seeing how I could improve them and being handed those like key fundamental aspects of strength and conditioning training that could directly translate into skills training and fencing, where whether it be stability like the hips, handling weight shift better, or just like being able to move my weight in an optimal way that doesn't really injure me. And and you're asking if we had any injury prevention protocols. We did. We had a lot of those. We do a lot of strength and mobility where it'll be like no weights. It's just body weight and just handling different ranges of motion, building strength in certain compromised positions that they were able to identify in my fencing, and sort of just giving me more of a stable foundation to build on all my skills, which I saw directly and like very quickly improved the current skills that I already had. So having that sit down video now, having an analytical approach is kind of what sold me on the idea, where they were like, hey, we can fix this aspect of you like in like a month or two. If you just follow this protocol, just eat right, recover properly, and we'll check in every single week with you and see your progress and see that range of motion, see that strength, and sort of just like keep you on that progressive overload timeline and make sure that you're lifting more and you're raising the quality of those lifts at the same time.
And you've also mentioned that what really kind of draw your attention is that you increased the range of motion, which gave you a deeper lunge.
Mhm.
What psychologically, how does that make you feel? Like, oh wow, now I can lunge more, and if someone is, if I'm short a centimeter or two, I'm just gonna cover that. How does that make you feel when you're in a competition and you're in a bout and you go, well, not this time, you're not gonna get away that easily, and it catches a person off guard. Psychologically, how does that transfer to you, to dopamine levels shooting up and you feeling like this is it, my coaches are doing the right thing and I'm trusting the process no matter how difficult it is, and every little component that they put effort into it translates to one thing or another that makes me be able to deliver the technique on point.
So I could say what it does is that it's like as someone in my own fencing, I don't necessarily lunge too often, but having that feeling in a competition where I would like be short, like just like that little bit of distance and being able to just cover it in an instant, very comfortably, very short, like very like resolutely. It gives you like a very like it's like a very like huge feeling of confidence and like pride where you're like, yeah, I just did that. Like I can achieve that like no matter what. Like it doesn't matter how far you try to get away. I know that I can achieve a good chase down on this lunge. And it's a very like you just feel powerful in the moment. You just feel like your locus of control in terms of like the bouting arena, like the strip, is has been greatly expanded, and it just gets like your tactical mind thinking, okay, cool, I can operate at a greater distance. I have like a far greater range with all my attacks, and my precision, basically it elevates your precision because you can keep it at a more consistent rate now.
Mm,
And just having that assurance, having that confidence, knowing that your opponent will never be too far out of your reach, or like they just won't be out of your reach.
mm,
It gives me more of a calmness in my bouts that helps me sort through my tactics and just understanding bout psychology and basically tracking what they're doing and tracking my own reactions rather than getting caught up in like useless semantics such as whether or not I feel comfortable or not in the bout, how I'm feeling, or like the intangibles where like you're not too sure, but you're either overestimating or underestimating your opponent. It gives me a more level-headed approach on what I can and can't do and what my opponent can and can't respond to.
the reason I asked this question is because when you have all the tools at your disposal and you start to master them and you see all the results that you're achieving because you're working at them, and not to take away from South African fencing, not at all, because in America you have a proper structure, especially when you do collegiate fencing, and
Mm.
I mean there is a team of people working with you. It's really isn't a no-brainer in that respect to figure out
Mm.
what's happening. Versus um, you go to South Africa and you have a coach who's really good, competent coach, and you're achieving results in the country and in Africa and internationally competing. And then you realize with very limited resources and no team other than a skill coach, South Africans achieve these results. And now the full round, around 360 that I'm going to go with the question. And it makes me always feel proud when you have so little given to athletes here and they still achieve so much.
Mhm.
We're talking about Salam Aduma in 2008, the Olympics. We're talking about Harry Seiner
Mhm.
with 2024. Um, Qualifying is just on its own is a big achievement. And then you have all these, I would call it tools and weapons, sharp edges given at your disposal, and you still realize that you're one of the thousands and thousands and thousands of people worldwide who are competitive and really good. How does it make you feel? And here's the question. How does it make you feel that despite the fact that you've achieved all these uh, goals that were set by your team of people, and then you still understand there are thousands of people who are receiving similar or same instructions, and you have to compete again against them? Does it overwhelm you, or do you have a secret strategy that goes, well, I can handle it?
I guess you could say, I wouldn't call it a secret strategy or anything that I do intentionally. It's just coming from the South African context of what fencing is, and like you chimed on it, in South Africa, we don't receive nearly as much as what is offered here in America, and still being able to compete and perform and even achieve over all these other thousands of athletes that are receiving this and have been since like the tender age of like 16 or something. It it doesn't necessarily scare me because the general mentality that I go in is that my opponent is simply doing the best that they can do given the environment that they're allowed to function and grow in. And I just need to be able to do the same and we'll take it from there. Whether a loss or a win happens is besides the fact. It's just kind of a case of we're here to compete. Now we're here to compete. It's not necessarily a battle of whose training structure is better, although those do contribute greatly. It's just a matter of like you're duking out for who's the better athlete right now, like here and now in this moment. And to me, I don't really focus on the bigger picture of what goes behind the greater athletes. It's just whatever's in the moment. What do I have at my like within like hands reach? And can't say I like thought about it far too much, but I guess that's just like
One step at a time, you take it.
yeah.
You take it as it goes, as it
Yeah.
goes. Um, to ask you this question, where you arrived to America, that was 2020, right? Correct.
2021.
21.
2021.
But you enrolled in 2020 via
Yeah.
online. That's what I understood. And
Yeah.
so you had these, what, 4 years to transition to American way of fencing, and their skill training is different from South African. And when we spoke originally, you mentioned that you only now getting to the point where you made a full transition. So it took quite a long time to transition from South African skill training to American skill training. Why did it take 3 years? Can you give us a context? Was it because your coaches are very thorough and very pedantic about certain details? Is it that different from South African coaching? What are the elements that contribute to this long process of changing the skill?
I'd say the element that contributed would mainly just because fencing, how I view my fencing in particular, is something that's very closely intertwined with like my life and just how everything else that goes into life, like academics, work, professional development, mental development, all that. Because I have fencing so close in proximity to what my regular life is, um, going into the development or like the transitional stage was kind of it was a self decision, a decision I made by my own, where I wanted to make sure that I was tweaking everything else to spec that could keep up with my fencing life. Because I ran into a roadblock where my performances were ramping up very quickly, but then when it came to just like me, like Jesse, like Jesse the student, I wasn't necessarily able to keep up with the cultural shift necessarily and like how many competitions happen here in America, what are we used to, what are we competing in. and going back to regular life and keeping up with my study schedule and just going to work and having a regular life outside of the sport. So with me, it was more of a case of I was the pedantic one. I was the one who wanted to be very thorough and just making sure that I was making accommodations for just having a bigger fencing career because you'd find the time where like you'd struggle financially or you just struggle time-wise where you're not necessarily keeping up with all of your deadlines and all your different various sectors of where your life is spread out into. And I didn't want to make a full nosedive into the fencing until I was very sure that I could take some time away from other things that I had going on, other projects, without losing whatever academic accrual I built up in that, or without losing any progress or time and what I could achieve outside of the sport. I just wanted to make sure I was going into the fencing and building a life for myself that I wouldn't necessarily regret or have like any sense of FOMO, I guess you could say. And when I felt very settled, when I felt very secure in like my environment, the life that I built for myself here, it became a case of okay, cool, now we can start pursuing fencing and just keep going at that, knowing that I'm not necessarily losing anything by by charging for those endeavors.
Jesse, you talked about, to recap with your answer, you talked about not losing sight of your studies because that's the primary thing you dare to study. And then obviously, I don't want to now say secondary fencing, they're both important, but making sure that your studies are going 100% good, and then that you psychologically feeling well immersed in the culture in America. You're not having any thoughts of or negativities. And once all of that felt right for you, did you say, okay, now it's time to push with fencing? I already have my foot in there. I'm doing my skill training. I'm doing my strength and conditioning, sports psychology, prehab. Everything is going, but now I'm going to accelerate. I'm going to put the foot on that accelerator, and I'm just going to move 1,000 k's an hour and transition to American type of fencing. And with that, my question that I want to ask is, were there ever times where your South African way of fencing came in handy, where you caught American fencers off guard and they went like, whoa, whoa, I'm not expecting this. What is this? We're expecting an American fencer here. Or do they have a lot of experiences competing internationally and they just don't even blink?
I have had my fair share of instances where my style like would catch a lot of fencers here off guard, where they just were not expecting my approach in my bouts. But as I started like climbing the levels of different fencers, uh, in the collegiate setting here in America, you're quite literally going up against like some of like the best fencers in the world that have like a wealth of international fencing experience. Where to them it wasn't necessarily anything that would like got them by shock. I could tell that a lot of fences I was fencing against where it just felt like they like upped they upped the intensity just like a little bit more against me. Where bouts were like watching like against my teammates, it would be a point where like they'd have like a certain repetition or like grouping of actions that they just like keep cycling through against them. And then when I would go and fence them, you'd see like the way they would approach the bout against me would completely flip on its head, where they're doing new techniques I hadn't seen them do it in like two or three other bouts previously. And it just became, I guess you could say the fencing for me when they would encounter me became a lot more enjoyable because it felt more of like an interaction, like a conversation between the opponent where we're not just like, being robotic and just doing the same two, three actions that we know will work. And like the results already been decided before we saluted each other. And it just made everything feel like it made like the stakes feel a lot higher because it wasn't just a case of having like a match. It was okay, cool. Like my fencing, like it was like I'm putting my fencing against your fencing, and we're gonna keep duking it out until like one of us comes out victorious. And like the bouts were a lot more enjoyable. They felt a lot more fun. They felt a lot more real. And I just caught myself being more invested in my bouts as I got better, as I was going on the upper echelon of the fencing of the fencing world here. And I just catch myself like basically, playing through like a bout that I had last week and just like remembering because I had so much enjoyment of that bout, whether like I won or I lost. And I would infer from those bouts on how I could improve, what I wanted to work on for like my next piece of like skill training. And I'll just take it from there.
How well accepted are you by your teammates in America, and how different is it from the South African teammates?
I wouldn't say it's too different. My teammates here, I've made a lot of like I made a lot of great connections with a lot of my teammates, whether in South Africa or here in America. I've also made friends with a lot of other fencers across the country here in America, where I find myself referring to my I find myself like mixing up when I'm referring to like my teammates here in America compared to my teammates in South Africa. And I'll be, oh, I have a teammate that does X, Y, and Z. And then they'll be like, oh, like I didn't know, like let's say I'll be talking to a South African friend, and they're like, oh, I didn't know Harry was involved in that. I'm like, oh no, sorry, not like South African teammate, my American teammate. Because to me, like they're the same. Like I hold them in the same regard. They're all like great and wonderful people that I'm very privileged to get to know. And I'd like to think that I've been received very well because I've received unconditional support here from my teammates in America, where it's gone to the point where they've helped me get to competitions. They've helped like help me find funding for my competitions abroad when it comes to like the World Cups. And I'm very grateful for them because they're people who have seen my vision, who understood my vision, understood me as a person first and foremost, and they're people who have shown me the kindness that I have hopefully shown them too. But again, I view my fencing as of I view my personal life, and just having those relationships is very important, very special to me. And I guess you could say what I have heard from them, just like on passing conversations, is that the South African context of how we develop relationships there in South Africa is a breath of fresh air to how they have their relationship here in America. Where if I'm going to be working with a fencer or a coach, it's not just a case of what can you do for me. It's I want to like really like, get to know and understand you and know if like you're like a good fit for me. Because if it's just for like the sake of good instruction, you can get that with any amount of money. But it needs to be someone that understand my own psychology, someone
Being
not necessarily
invested.
yeah, like someone who like has like a real connection with me where we both feel comfortable developing what is like my fencing. So I'd say where I am right now, I've been received really well.
Received very well. I wanna open this door because you mentioned they helped you with the funding to go uh, compete internationally. How does the structure work there? What is the support net? How do they help with the um, international competitions with their competitors?
I would say crowdfunding has become a really like big source of securing those funds. But also just a case of when they help out with things like if I need spare equipment, I've had friends who were like, hey, just take one of my blades, or don't worry about like you don't need to worry about the price of that. I'll just buy it for you. Here you go. And it's people who like who've been very like willing and freely just like seeing the investment of the contributing towards me and my dream, and just being very comfortable and like trusting of the fact that like I will do everything in my power to achieve it. So I'd say that's like the biggest way. And well, not the biggest, the most common way. The most significant I've had over that's been the most consistent over the last like 4 or 5 years has been through the university, where for a long time they have like funded like for all my equipment, all the competitions all the big competitions I've competed in. They have found some way to contribute within like their legal means that has like gotten me to like NCAA regionals, the Central Collegiate conferences that I won 2 seasons ago. They were first and foremost in control of the funding for like the hotels, transportation, equipment.
Jesse, you're breaking out.
A great help for me personally.
So let's start from equipment. You were breaking up just now. Help you with the equipment. You're frozen.
Yes, they helped me. They help me with equipment, travel, and accommodations. And they've also put me in a position to receive other help from the International Olympic Committee as well. So they've like put me in the right rooms with the right people and helped me develop really strong connections and relationships with a lot of big players in the sport who have seen my vision and want to help in any way that they can.
Rephrasing. I want to just pick up from helped you get in contact with the very big players in sport. What does that mean? They basically put you in contact, or do they bring big sports people to the university to hold talks, or both? How's that work?
They've put me in contact with them. Because my current head coach for Cleveland State University, her name is Jennifer Oldham. She is a part of, she did a course to get her own Olympic Committee certification. And through her, she's introduced me to a lot of pivotal people who a lot of want and uh, sort of excitement in contributing to my adventure in the fencing world. So it's she just sort of like helped me secure a lot of relationships and a fair bit of funding through the International Olympic Committee that's helping me in this next season going forward.
Jesse, talking about uh, the International Olympic Committee, are you looking to compete at the Olympics? That's the first question. And what is the next stage? What are you looking for your goals for achieving for your achievement goals for this year, next year? And if you're looking to go for the Olympics, um, are you going to go through South African uh, system, or are you going to go through American competition system for the Olympics?
So say my next stage for this next year is the volume of fencing. I just want to have a, I want to build up my experience in fencing in the international circuit and just gear myself more for that type of competition because last year I didn't dabble too much in the international circuit. I went to one competition, the Vancouver World Cup. And in that competition, it was a complete shock and scare, just because like the level of fencing I was like going up against and like the quality of fencing, the caliber was like it was the highest level of fencing I had done ever, and it was the most consistent level of like high level fences I was going up against, where every single bout to me felt like, oh, I'm like not sure how I'll actually perform in this. I didn't have like, any like sure attacks. I didn't have any sure like matchups where I felt the same amount of confidence I have fencing at like a very like national level here in America and in South Africa. And I really did like that feeling of that uncertainty of like, I don't know how this match will end. And I feel like that's something I just want to get more used to. So I'm not taken off guard or taken aback, and I can properly adjust my expectations of how fencing will go. I do hope at least to qualify for my first senior African championships and in turn my first senior world championships because of the two competitions I have not had any luck qualifying for. Just because when I became a senior fencer, I was already here in America and I couldn't compete I couldn't compete in a good amount of South African national competitions to get the necessary points to qualify for the squads, but I have still been in contact with the squad. I fenced for them in the university games. And for the year after this next one, um, I'm hoping that I'll be at a level where I can at least hopefully make a good result at a World Cup, looking at anything within the top 16 in the world. I've trained against a few fencers. I've trained with an Olympic champion from South Korea. His name's Park Sang-yong, and all the high level fences I've had the opportunity to like have like a training camp with have expressed to me that they do believe that they can see me reaching those levels. It's just a matter of refining my skill, sorting out my goals, and just giving the right amount of commitment to them and just pushing through and going for it. So I just want to get my volume. And then after I get the right amount of competition so I can have the correct expectations and mentality, I will start chasing for the big results, looking for the medals, looking for all of that. And then hopefully all of that will culminate and result in qualifying for the 2028 Olympics.
So
And I
there,
would want to South Africa in those. That is my goal.
Jesse, we talked about qualifying, let's say long term, let's say Olympic qualification, which we still have in 2028 in your now home country, adopted country where you're studying. But before we reach that point, you're going to be finishing with your studies and you're going to be going into the work. And I'm not mentioning work as a first time element. You've no doubt done other jobs where you went waitering or selling clothes, but those are all support works while you're studying and training. You're going to be entering the real work as in your field of expertise. And having said that, have you thought about, is it going to be in America? Is it going to be elsewhere coming back? And also balancing the commitment aspect of keeping up the level of training with the fact that you're going to be entering professionally within your field of expertise, your work, and how you manage to balance that off moving forward.
So I'm glad that you brought that up because I have actually been thinking about how things would work post graduation. It would be very convenient and easy for me to build a career for myself here in America or in like elsewhere that's closer to the main central fencing hubs, just because it will help me ensure that I'm getting easy access to the high level competitions as well as high level training. Um, that is again with me keeping in mind that I do know that back in South Africa, Kennedy Tishta has been has been a phenomenal coach for me. It's just that understanding if I'm going to be tackling life professionally, I would want to keep myself tethered close to and around the biggest fencing hubs in the world. And I've already built a network for myself here in America, fencing wise, that's kept me healthy, kept me performing at high levels, and kept me at a very high level of stimulus that's kind of encouraged me to keep on fencing. And just in a sense, I've been having a lot more fun fencing here. And not to say that this is like the end all be all answer. Obviously, life will hand you stray opportunities that come out of the corner. But for now, going forward, I think that'll be within my best interests when it comes to training, preparing for the Olympics, and just having to schedule. I mean like, not schedule, balance my schedule when it comes to like having a genuine career now, not just a side job. Um, I feel it's something that I do feel it's something I am able to do just off of having a very stacked and busy schedule all throughout my high school career, all through my college career. And how I understand is that less, I would have less responsibilities, well, less varying responsibilities to focus on, but more moments where I have to put in very thoughtful, intention, critical thought in how I'll be planning out my day. Because again, like you mentioned, it's a career. And I feel like I've been preparing pretty well for having that set environment for when the time comes, which is why I'm taking this tackle into the next season, just getting my fencing volume up because I can at the moment. I'm not working any specific job right now. So just taking opportunities while they come and knowing that when I do start my professional career, I will have to calm down a little bit on the amount of competitions and train that I do. But in that, I'm trying to take in stride before it gets to that point. I'm gonna try get as much competition as I can in a season, just so I can see what it takes, what I should be striving for, and how I can optimize, refine, and sort of get a more efficient workflow and how I can train, practice, and
Right.
compete without taking too much from personal life.
Perfect. Jesse, is there anything you would like to cover in conclusion?
In conclusion, nothing directly comes to mind, but I just do want to say and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank
It
you.
means a
I
lot.
really appreciate it. You're really an excellent person to chat with, and I'm really happy that we have this chat, and you're most welcome.
It's when you texted me about it the first time, it again, I did feel like I had this sense of like I felt very cool. Just like I think about I was someone worth interviewing and talking to. So thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for
You're
having
welcome.
me. And
You're welcome.
I just hope that the platform and what you have going on helps and affects a lot of athletes and gives them the
Thank you.
information that they need to sort of, tackle the greater world outside of the sport and find that exit strategy that best suits them and how they can achieve their dreams while also, still having, the fun of leisure, the fun of like, everyday slow life. So
That's what we're working towards, and I'm hoping that to be so as well. We're working towards it.
mhm.
Jesse, very good chatting with you. I really enjoyed this conversation. I do hope it's going to be a wealth of knowledge for future generations. They'll turn to this and chat and go, "Wow, I want to watch it again," and make myself feel better and more confident about my sport and what I'm working towards. Again,
Yeah.
Jesse, thank you very much.
No, thank you. And
Thanks.
anytime you want to chat, just let me know. I am as free as possible at the moment. And yeah, I just hope that all the athletes that you're personally helping and supporting, just remind them some things take a little time. Everyone has their own due date and the occasion when they can rise and shine. And it's okay to slow things down a little bit because the success will come. The success will come.
Perfect. Jesse, thank you very much. And we'll have another conversation in the future. I'm looking forward to that.
Likewise. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, you too. Cheers. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.